I'm 28 years old, and for a while, I thought my life was on the right track. I had a steady job, a comfortable home, and a girlfriend I thought I could build a future with. She was 25, and though our relationship had its ups and downs, I believed we had something solid. That belief shattered one day when she dropped a bombshell that changed everything. At 6 months pregnant, she confessed the child she was carrying wasn't mine. She was crying, desperate for forgiveness, and explained that she had been cheating with her ex, a guy who bailed the moment he found out about the baby. That was the moment everything in my world turned upside down. Her confession felt like a sucker punch to the gut. She told me her ex, Chad, was a mistake, claiming it was a fling that spiraled out of control. She said he ran the moment responsibility knocked on his door, but by then, I wasn't listening. All I could think about was how she betrayed me while I was planning a life for us. I told her right then and there that forgiveness was off the table. She needed to leave after the baby was born, but until then, I would ensure she received the medical care she needed. That was the limit of my kindness. Over the following weeks, she kept insisting she had changed, saying that my support showed her what a real man was. She claimed she loved me, but her words felt hollow. I avoided engaging in those conversations, knowing there was no point. I wasn't about to let her sweet-talk her way back into my life. Then came another twist I hadn't expected. One day, while I was at work, I got a call from her mother. She was in tears, saying her daughter was in trouble and begging me to come home immediately. I rushed back, only to find my girlfriend in the middle of an emotional breakdown. She had received a message from Chad. Apparently, he wanted to meet her, claiming he was ready to step up and be a father. Her mother thought this was the reconciliation she needed, but I saw it for what it was, another disaster waiting to happen. Chad wasn't offering her stability. He was a ticking time bomb who would blow up her life all over again. I told her she could meet him if she wanted, but it wouldn't change a thing between us. She broke down, crying that she didn't want Chad, only me, but I walked out of the room, unwilling to entertain the drama. A few days later, she told me she decided to meet Chad for closure. I warned her not to bring him to my house or involve me in whatever mess came next. When she returned, she was quieter than usual. She wouldn't tell me much about their conversation, only that it didn't go well. The situation took a darker turn the following week. I noticed her acting paranoid, constantly looking over her shoulder and double-checking that the doors were locked. When I pressed her about it, she finally admitted the truth. Chad had threatened her. He wanted her to convince me to help financially support the baby, or he'd make life difficult for both of us. That was the final straw. I told her I wasn't getting dragged into Chad's mess and that she needed to figure it out on her own. I also warned her that if Chad showed up at my door, I wouldn't hesitate to call the police. But Chad didn't show up. Instead, he started harassing her with texts and calls, demanding money and accusing her of ruining his life. She was terrified, but I stood firm. This wasn't my fight. As the delivery date grew closer, her desperation escalated. Her mother pleaded with me to be at the hospital, saying it would mean the world to her daughter. I refused, telling her to call Chad if they needed emotional support. That didn't stop them from trying to guilt me, but I stayed resolute. The day of the delivery came with its own surprises. While she was at the hospital, I received a message from a mutual friend warning me that Chad was spreading lies about me. He claimed I had been abusive to her and was refusing to take responsibility for the baby. Furious, I called the hospital and demanded they keep Chad away from her room. That night, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. I didn't go to the hospital, just as I promised, but I made sure her mother had packed all her belongings and was ready to take her back once she was discharged. I kept everything civil, ensuring they had what they needed, but I made it clear they weren't welcome in my home anymore. The day she came to collect her things was tense. She cried, holding the baby in her arms, begging me to reconsider. I stood firm. I reminded her that I had done more than enough by providing support during her pregnancy. But my life, my home, and my trust were no longer hers. As she walked out the door, she turned back one last time and asked if I'd ever forgive her. I didn't even answer. Some things can't be undone, and she knew that better than anyone. For a while, I thought the chapter was closed, but the chaos was far from over. A few weeks after she left, I received an anonymous letter in the mail. It was a threat, crude and direct. If you don't take responsibility for that kid, you'll regret it. My gut told me it was from Chad. The handwriting was sloppy, and the tone matched his unhinged personality. I wasn't about to let him intimidate me. I handed the letter to a lawyer and informed the police. They agreed to keep it on record, but without concrete proof of Chad's involvement, there wasn't much they could do. Still, I wasn't about to sit back and let him play games. Around the same time, my ex's mother started calling me again, begging me to reconsider. She claimed her daughter was struggling and that the baby deserved a father figure. She even hinted that Chad was hanging around again, trying to worm his way back into her life. That only strengthened my resolve to stay out of it. Then came the breaking point. Late one night, I heard a loud banging on my front door. When I opened it, Chad was standing there, drunk and belligerent, screaming about how I had ruined his life by not stepping up for his kid. I could smell the alcohol on his breath and see the wild look in his eyes. He was spoiling for a fight. I told him to leave, but he shoved his way into the house, yelling about how I was a coward. He started throwing punches, but years of martial arts training kicked in. I blocked his blows, and in a matter of seconds, he was on the floor. I called the police, and they arrived quickly to arrest him. As they dragged him out of my house, he screamed that this wasn't over. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare, and it left me shaken but more determined than ever to cut ties with the toxic mess my ex had brought into my life. The next day, I contacted my lawyer to ensure there were no loose ends. I wanted everything documented, from the threats to the intrusion, and made it clear that I wouldn't hesitate to press charges if Chad or my ex tried anything else. But it wasn't over. A few days later, I received a message from my ex. She claimed Chad had been arrested but was now blaming me for everything, telling her I was the reason his life had fallen apart. She begged me to drop any charges and help them find a way to fix this for the baby's sake. I didn't reply. What happened next shocked even me. Chad attempted to contact me from jail. He sent a letter apologizing for his behavior and begging me to take care of them because he couldn't. It was a bizarre mix of desperation and entitlement, and I filed it away as evidence, refusing to engage. The situation finally came to a head when my ex's mother showed up unannounced with the baby. She pleaded with me to at least meet him, saying he deserved to know who I was since I had supported them during the pregnancy. I told her firmly that I wasn't the father, nor was I responsible for cleaning up her daughter's mistakes. I asked them to leave and not come back. The look on her face was a mix of anger and defeat, but I didn't care anymore. I had done my part, and it was time for them to take responsibility for their own lives. After that final visit, my life grew quieter. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. I refocused on my work, my friends, and rebuilding the peace I had before this storm. The mess my ex and Chad had created was no longer my concern, and I intended to keep it that way. Occasionally, I heard updates through mutual friends. Chad stayed in and out of trouble, unable to hold down a job or clean up his act. My ex struggled to manage on her own, leaning heavily on her mother for help. They were still dealing with the consequences of their choices, but I refused to let it affect me. A part of me felt bad for the baby. He was innocent in all of this, but I reminded myself that stepping back was the best thing I could do. The child needed stability, not a reluctant father figure with no trust or love for his mother. Looking back, I see this chapter of my life as a hard lesson in boundaries and self-respect. I gave what I could during her pregnancy, but I learned when to walk away. Not everyone deserves a second chance, and no one has the right to demand your forgiveness. Now, I'm focused on moving forward. I've learned to value myself and protect my peace, even when others try to drag me into their chaos. It's not always easy, but it's necessary. If you're dealing with betrayal or someone trying to manipulate your kindness, remember this: helping doesn't mean sacrificing your self-respect. Know when to step away and prioritize your own well-being. If you found this story relatable or insightful, subscribe to my YouTube channel for more stories and advice on navigating life's toughest challenges.